Kyrylo Budanov, head of Ukraine's main Intelligence Directorate, stated that by 2023, Russia's professional army had been destroyed and they are now relying solely on sheer numbers in combat. He said this in an interview with Ukrinform. The professional army was effectively destroyed by around 2023, and now Russia relies on mobilized troops. Although they are formally considered contract soldiers, the approach remains the same. People are recruited, given at most 2 weeks of training, and then sent to the front. They are fighting purely with numbers, Budanov stated. He also noted that Russia's objectives remain unchanged. They have not abandoned them and continue to discuss them publicly. Their supreme leader insists that the goals of the special military operation must be achieved. As was rightly pointed out, Kiev in 3 days has now turned into the 3rd anniversary of the full-scale invasion. Clearly something did not go as planned, added the head of the Intelligence Directorate. Besides, the IISS estimates that Russian equipment losses in 2024 amounted to around 1,400 main battle tanks and more than 3,700 infantry fighting vehicles and armored personnel carriers. In total, Russia is estimated to have lost approximately 14,000 main battle tanks, infantry fighting vehicles and armored personnel carriers since it launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Despite these staggering numbers, Russia has been able to reconstitute some of these losses by relying on stored Soviet legacy equipment. The IISS estimates that last year, Russia refurbished and built more than 1,500 main battle tanks and around 2,800 infantry fighting vehicles and armored personnel carriers. Equipment remaining in storage is highly likely to be in a deteriorated condition, which may make it difficult for Russia to deliver enough equipment to offset previous attrition rates. The main issue that Russia suffers from is a dearth of infantry fighting vehicles and armored personnel carriers, even with greater rates of production. However, Russia has adapted its tactics, which try to mitigate these issues by relying on stopgap measures and further infantry-based assaults to push the front line. Like equipment losses, it is difficult to know the exact number of Russian casualties. However, as of early January 2025, the IISS estimates that a minimum of 172,000 Russian troops have been killed and 611,000 wounded, of which at least 376,000 are severely wounded, with up to an accumulated 235,000 wounded but recoverable. Russian recruitment, including the forced mobilization in occupied Donbass, the mobilization in 2022, and recruiting from the prison system, has generated approximately 976,000 personnel for the war effort. Up to 617,000, including those recoverable wounded and those undergoing training, are therefore estimated by the IISS to be deployed in or near Ukraine as of late December 2024.
Russian President Vladimir Putin on Thursday hailed the start of a renewed dialogue with the U.S., saying that the administration of President Donald Trump showed a pragmatism, a realistic view, and noting that it had abandoned the stereotypes and messianic ideological clichés of its predecessors. The first contacts with the new U.S. administration encouraged certain hopes, Putin said at a meeting with top officials of the Federal Security Service, Russia's top domestic security agency. There is a mutual readiness to work to restore relations and gradually solve a colossal amount of systemic strategic problems in the global architecture, he said. According to Associated Press, he hailed the Russian troops fighting in Ukraine, saying that their courage and resilience had created the conditions for the beginning of talks on a peaceful settlement. He added that the resumption of U.S.-Russian contacts vexed many in Europe and emphasized that Russian diplomats and security agencies should focus their efforts on resisting attempts to derail U.S.-Russian talks.
Первые контакты с новой американской администрацией вселяют определенные надежды. Есть встречный настрой работать на восстановление межгосударственных отношений. Но постепенное решение колоссального объема накопившихся системных стратегических проблем в мировой архитектуре. А именно эти проблемы в свое время спровоцировали и украинские, и другие региональные кризисы. Важно, что наши сегодняшние партнеры демонстрируют прагматизм, реальный взгляд на вещи. Отказываются от многих стереотипов, так называемых правил, и мессианских идеологических клише своих предшественников, которые, собственно, и привели к кризису всей системы международных отношений. Сегодняшние динамичные изменения в международном ландшафте – это в огромной степени результат мужества и стойкости наших вооруженных сил, наших героев. Именно они своей доблестью, своими ежедневными победами создали условия для начала серьезного диалога. Понимаем, что не всех устраивает возобновление российско-американских контактов. Часть западных элит по-прежнему настроена на сохранение нестабильности в мире. И эти силы будут пытаться сорвать или скомпрометировать начавшийся диалог. Мы это с вами видим. Нам нужно это учитывать и использовать все возможности дипломатии и специальных служб для срыва подобных попыток.
Thursday's talks between Russia and the US will be first in a series of consultations, Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said at her weekly news briefing. We expect that today's meeting will be the first in a series of such expert consultations that will bring us and the American side closer to overcoming the differences that have arisen, strengthening confidence-building measures, and so on, Zakharova said. According to Associated Press, Russian and U.S. diplomats met in Istanbul on Thursday to discuss ways to normalize the operation of their respective embassies after rounds of diplomats' expulsions in the past years. Last week's U.S.-Russian talks in Riyadh marked an extraordinary shift in Washington's foreign policy under Trump and a clear departure from U.S.-led efforts to isolate Russia over its war in Ukraine. In Riyadh, Moscow and Washington agreed to start working toward ending the war and improving their diplomatic and economic ties. That includes restoring staffing at embassies, which in recent years were hit hard by mutual expulsions of large numbers of diplomats, closures of offices, and other restrictions. Speaking about the US-Ukraine minerals deal, Zakharova called it a new kind of slavery. They are selling Ukrainian minerals, both explored, and the soils that are now being exported, and those that seem to be there, or maybe are there, or there is an understanding that they may be there. Do you understand? That's what it is. This is simply a new kind of slavery, which is now being experimentally tested on Ukraine and its people by Western so-called curators, Zakharova said.
Мы рассчитываем, что сегодняшняя встреча станет первой в череде подобных экспертных консультаций, которые приблизят нас с американской стороной к преодолению возникших разногласий, укреплению мер доверия, ну и так далее. Еще раз хотел бы подчеркнуть, мы будем комментировать по мере поступления информации, но работы у экспертов огромное количество. Главным раздражающим фактором является то, что эти контакты были абсолютно заблокированы. Вы же помните, переговоры не велись никаким образом, ни очно, ни по телефону, ни на уровне глав внешнеполитических ведомств, ни на уровне экспертов. Не встречались наши делегации на площадках международных организаций. Вот вам и ответ на вопрос, как они распоряжаются своими будущими поколениями. Они продают недра Украины, и разведанные, и почвы, которые сейчас вывозятся, и те, которые вроде как и есть, или может быть есть, или есть понимание, что они могут быть там. Понимаете? Вот что это такое. Это просто такое новое рабство, которое сейчас в экспериментальном порядке отрабатывается на Украине, ее народе, западными так называемыми кураторами.